Welcome to the Winnebago Recovers virtual Lunch and Learn series, Opioid and Substance Use Response. My name is Hannah and I am the Breakwater Coordinator. The purpose of this series is to equip our community with available resources and find ways we can work collaboratively and effectively to prevent substance use, ensure access to affordable and timely harm reduction and treatment services, and support a strong and vibrant Winnebago County recovery community. According to the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics, there were an estimated 100,306 drug overdose deaths in the United States during the 12-month period from April 20th, 2020 to April 2021, which was an increase of 28.5% from the 78,056 deaths during the same period the year before. Harm reduction is a vital piece of keeping our community safe and healthy. We hope today's panel will highlight the work being done in our community to meet people where they are, keep people who use drugs safe, and prevent more overdose deaths. With me today are Chief Kurt Leibold from UW-Oshkosh, Amanda Tennyson from Vivent Health, and Danielle Florence from the Health Department. Welcome all. Danielle, can you please start us off with an introduction to what harm reduction is and what it could look like?
Sure. So hi everyone, my name is Danielle, like Hannah said. I am a community health strategist with the Winnebago County Health Department. And one of my main roles here at the Health Department is our harm reduction efforts, which is why all of us are here today. So Hannah had mentioned that statistic from the CDC about overdose deaths. And more locally here in Winnebago County, we have something called an overdose fatality review, which is a team of community partners, over 40 community partner agencies. And they come together each and every month and they share data and identify what we as a community could have done differently to prevent those overdoses that happen within our community. So it's looking at us as a community, where could we have intervened? And their findings of data was that from 2019 through 2021, overdose deaths in our county, specifically Winnebago County, doubled from 2019 to over 40 suspected in 2021. And in large part, that is due to something called fentanyl. And fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. It's been in the news quite a bit recently, but that's been a driver of a lot of this. So in front of us, you'll see this photo, and these are 2-inch vials. All of these that are in front of you are deadly doses of these specific amounts that are in here. And you can see that there's a huge difference between all three of these. You know, fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more powerful than heroin. And you can see just the teeniest tiny bit of how deadly carfentanil is. And what's happening in our community is that middle one, that fentanyl one, is being mixed into pretty much every substance that's out there. And people don't know about it. They don't know that this is in their substance. And so they're using their usual amounts and overdosing and dying because fentanyl is in their stuff and they don't know about it. And one way that we're trying to prevent that overdose is through our harm reduction work. So just kind of what is harm reduction? It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. And that it's trying to mitigate those risks associated with drug use. So it's practical strategies and ideas aimed at reducing negative consequences associated with drug use through things like safer use, managed use, safety, all sorts of stuff. And it meets people where they're at in their journey and helps keep them as safe as we can during this time. And harm reduction can look different in every community, and there's a whole bunch of different strategies to accomplish that. And some of the things we're going to be talking about today include Life Point syringe program, fentanyl test strips, and Narcan. And these all play a role in harm reduction. You know, they reduce rates of HIV, Hep C, reduce the risk of overdose and death, and it creates this network of safe spaces and places to meet people where they're at and make sure that we're getting those tools that people need to stay safe to them in a way that's non-judgmental and makes them feel safe and want to get those services. And it's also important to keep in mind that harm reduction is not the end all. It's a critical and vital piece on the journey towards recovery. Ultimately, that goal is recovery, but we need people to be alive to reach that stage. So that's where all of our work comes in. And Amanda, I know your organization is super involved in our community with getting those resources out.
Go ahead, Amanda. Please introduce yourself and talk about Vivent Health for us.
My name is Amanda Tennyson. I am the prevention specialist at Vivent Health in Appleton. So a lot of people know us as the needle exchange program. However, Vivent Health is a bit more than that. So Vivent Health is actually an HIV medical home that provides wraparound care for people living with HIV. The department that I'm from is the prevention department, which is the department that provides the syringe exchange program. So there has been a lot of overdoses in all counties in the area. As Danielle stated earlier, the accidental overdoses, a lot of them are due to fentanyl being put into substances. A lot of people that are opiate users feel that, that are not opiate users feel that they are not at risk for this fentanyl overdose, and that is not correct. There's fentanyl being put into meth, MDMA, cocaine. We get reports back that it's being put in marijuana. So what we do at Vivent Health, along with providing Narcan and training individuals and organizations on how to use Narcan, we also provide something called fentanyl testing strips. So what these do is allows the person to test their substance prior to using to see if it will detect any fentanyl. So these are, this is data from 2021 pulled by each location. So Vivent Health has 10 locations over the state of Wisconsin. So you can see at each location how many strips were distributed throughout 2021, and then the amount of results we got back from clients. So this is a peer-led data collection. So this is what we get from our clients that are using these strips that come back and tell us. And this slide right here is the positivity rate for fentanyl by location. So for heroin is the dark gray box, and then methamphetamine is the light gray box. So you can see that the difference between locations, what is testing positive for fentanyl and what is not. So the Appleton office, which would be my location, I also incorporate Winnebago County as well, as we do partner with the Winnebago County Health Department to provide fentanyl testing strips and the syringe exchange program. So the next slide that is going to tell you what behaviors were changed after getting those positive results from the fentanyl testing strips. So we want them to test their substance prior to injecting or using however method they're using to get high. We want them to change their behavior, which then will potentially save them from an overdose. Like I said earlier, it doesn't matter if you're using once, if you're somebody who uses on a daily basis, this does put you at risk for overdose. So you can see that the behaviors have changed with positive and negative results. So the fentanyl testing strips will test for about 6 types of fentanyl. There are about 20 types out there, but it does test for the main fentanyl, and it also does test for carfentanil. So this is proven to save lives. Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda. Danielle, do you mind going into Winnebago County Health Department's piece, and really what is Narcan?
Yeah, so kind of how Amanda mentioned a little bit earlier, we partner with Vivent Health. So the health department's role is to kind of surround and support and fill these gaps to make sure that everyone in our community has access to these services. Because driving up to Appleton can be a barrier for people too. Transportation is an issue. The bus systems don't correlate very well from here to Appleton. So transportation can be a huge issue. So by bringing that here, we're able to better serve our community. So like Amanda mentioned, we do the LifePoint syringe services, more recently fentanyl test strips. And one of the things that we really push is something called Narcan, which I know Kurt's going to go into in a minute here. But our big thing is we give out as much Narcan as we possibly can. This is what Narcan looks like. It's a nasal spray. A lot of places used to have the injectable kind, but we're really big on nasal spray. And what it looks just like if you've taken allergy medication in a nasal, this is pretty much the exact same thing. It works the exact same, looks the exact same. So it's nothing to be afraid of. And this is the type that we give out. So any nasal spray, that's what we'll do. How it works is if someone is overdosing, you would put this up their nose and you would squirt it. It has a plunger on the bottom. And why this works and how this works is that when someone is overdosing, what's happening is this is their nerves, and there's opiates that are floating out here, and they're connecting to those receptors that are specific to opiates. And the body goes, this is great. And then it forgets to breathe because that's what those receptors are telling them to do. So what Narcan does is it comes in and puts a lovely little cover on it, and it prevents all those opiates from getting into those receptors. So your body remembers, hey, I need to breathe. When Narcan is administered, it can take between 2 to 3 minutes for this to take effect. And what we're finding with the fentanyl in our community is it's taking more than one of these to bring people back. It's taking more like 2, sometimes 3 doses to get to that point. So each of these come with 2 doses in here. So that's really helpful. That's pretty much how you use Narcan. We do get the question a lot when it comes to Narcan of, what if I give this to somebody and they're not overdosing? What's going to happen? And the answer is nothing, because remember that sheet that comes over that covers it, it's only blocking those opiate receptors. So if there's none in there, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to harm anybody. So that's a big thing to keep in mind too. If you give this to someone and they weren't actually overdosing, that's okay. You're not going to hurt them in any way, shape, or form. Our department is also part of something called the Wisconsin Narcan Direct program. And Hannah, if you could drop that link in the chat for me. But what this program does is it supplies different community agencies, pharmacies with Narcan for free. So a lot of the pharmacies that have it, generally there's a charge associated with it. I've heard differing of it can cost $50 to $80. It just kind of depends on the pharmacy you go to. But you don't need a prescription. So anyone could walk into these pharmacies and ask for Narcan. You don't need that prescription. Our health department, Vivent, Unity Solutions, and there are a few other places in our community offer this, that you can walk in, get trained, and walk out with it for free. So that is something that we offer. Anyone from our community can walk into our building, get trained. We're also able to supply organizations within Winnebago County. So we can supply any place that would like some training, we can do that. I know Vivent does that, offers that service as well. And we've actually recently been able to supply Oshkosh EMS with Narcan leave behind kits, which has been a really huge success, and awesome to see some of these partnerships bloom and create a safe space in our community.
One question before we move on that's in the chat related to Narcan. What is the shelf life for Narcan?
Great question. Generally speaking, when we get them in, on the top, it comes in with a lot number and an expiration date. Generally, from the time we get them, they're good for 2 to 2.5 years. So this one that came in not that long ago expires July of 2024. So generally speaking, 2 to 4 years, or 2 to 4 years, 2 months, or 2 years and a little bit. There we go. I've got it. The other thing with Narcan is it likes to sit at a happy room temperature. So if you have it, and we live in Wisconsin, where it could freeze and boil in the same week. So you want to make sure that you keep it happy. So if you're wanting to keep it with you at all times, keep it with you that you would take in and out of the car, so it doesn't just sit there, because that's not happy when that happens.
Thank you, Danielle. So we know that working on substance use efforts takes a community. So we have with us here Kurt Leibold, Chief of Police for UWO. Kurt, can you please just introduce yourself and what UWO is doing with harm reduction?
Sure. Thank you, Hannah, and hello, everybody. My name is Kurt Leibold. I'm Chief of Police at UW-Oshkosh, and I've been here for 6 years now. I've been policing for 33 years. I spent my first 26 years in the city of Milwaukee, where I retired as the assistant chief. And our mission at UWO is to prevent crime, fear, and disorder. But just as important is to make sure that our community is safe and healthy. So how do we do this? Well, we use data, and we proactively use data here on campus. And we partnership with our community to solve problems. And really, that's where everybody here comes in. My department is ingrained in the overdose fatality review, as well as breakwater. Specifically, myself and Captain Chris Tarman are very much a part of this group. So we're very well aware of the issues that are happening nationally with overdoses in Wisconsin and in our region, unfortunately. So we don't really have an overdose problem here on campus. We've had one in the 6 years that I've been here, but we're part of this community, and we can certainly be part of the solution as well. So we decided that for harm reduction, what we wanted to do was make Narcan available. And we are a public university. We have public buildings. So that's two-part. We wanted to keep our students, obviously, from preventing them from ever overdosing, but we also wanted to make Narcan available to the community in key locations. So I talked about partnerships. Well, this is a group that we partnered with that's on the screen now. It's Wisconsin Voices for Recovery. And ironically, they're out of UW-Madison, and their family medicine and community health department. They were able to get these boxes for us, and it was actually Todd Vandergallion is the one that pushed us to these people, and they, through a grant, are able to get these opioid kits to us. They gave us 14 of them, and we put one in each of our residence halls, which we have 10 residence halls, and then we put them in 4 of our public buildings, which is our Reeve Union, in our library, in our Student Recreation and Wellness Center, as well as in our Culver Family Welcome Center. And the reason why we picked that particular spot was because we know our homeless population likes to congregate along the river there, and that makes Narcan available if needed for that population. So for our community, what we want to do is make Narcan available just in case a student needs it, or if a family member may need it down the road. It doesn't necessarily have to be an emergency situation. So we have a 3-prong approach to our community here at UW-Oshkosh. Awareness and education is a key part of that. If you could bring up the poster. We want our community to know the dangers out there, and especially around prescription drugs, where fentanyl is being laced into these counterfeit pills. It doesn't take much to have an overdose and to kill somebody when you're taking fentanyl, particularly when you don't even know what you're taking. And we know our students, and they're in the time of their life, and we certainly don't condone it, but they're in the time of their life where they're experimenting a bit. And when we're seeing fentanyl laced in marijuana and drugs like Adderall and things like that, where we know our students will take these things to help them focus or to reduce their anxiety, well, that keeps us up at night. So we want to educate them, first of all, to make the right choices. So that's why we made these posters, and we put them all over our residence halls, particularly they're on every bathroom door, so a student can't miss them. And this also shows the signs of overdose, because unfortunately 2 students overdosed at one of the universities in the UW system, and they were with friends at the time, or they were talking to friends who didn't know the signs of an overdose. So they thought the students were just going to sleep, when in fact they were actually dying. So to get this information in their hands is key. To make Narcan available to them is also key, because we encourage anybody to use Narcan. We certainly want you to go through our training and be trained and have the confidence to use it. But in an emergency situation, we would hope that people would just do the right thing. So the last thing that we want our university community to know is about our medical, drug, and alcohol amnesty, medical amnesty. So that's really given the power back to the students if they may have made a wrong choice, or they may have ingested something that they thought was a pill, but it turned out to be fentanyl and an overdose occurs. we want them to know that they can call us and we'll help them. And we're not going to criminally hold that against them either. So that's a key part right there. They have to trust us that in an emergency situation, we're going to be there for them. And they can put the whole I'm going to get in trouble thing aside and worry more about helping people. So we're hoping other law enforcement agencies can look at that model and maybe down the road think about the things the same way as that.
Thank you so much, Kurt. A big piece of this Lunch and Learn is sharing about lived experience. And I want to bring Amanda back on to share with us a little bit about her lived experience.
Hi again. So again, my name is Amanda. I have been a person in long-term recovery from IV heroin use since 2013. And my view on harm reduction began when I started utilizing the syringe exchange program about 12, 13 years ago. Formerly, Vivent was the ARCW, the AIDS Resource Center of Wisconsin, and that's where I first learned that I am not alone, that just because I'm using doesn't mean that I don't deserve what everybody else deserves. So in May of 2013, I overdosed on heroin and was brought back to life with Narcan. And then one would think that was enough to make somebody get clean. At the time, it wasn't. I left the hospital and I continued using for another couple months until I was picked up for a felony manufacturing delivery of heroin charge. I sat in county jail for about 3 months, not knowing how to stop using substances. I was in there thinking that I was going to get out and I was going to inject water, just because the whole process is an addiction. It's not just the drug itself. A lot of people have the debate of whether it's a choice or whether it is something you were born with. I can tell you now, when I was a little girl, I did not wake up and say, I think I'm going to be a junkie when I grow up. I'm going to ruin my life. I'm going to hurt everybody that has come across my path, and I'm going to do things that would make me a horrible person. So upon my release, being charged with a felony, I thought I would never go anywhere in life. In the stigma with drugs and people who have charges from them, the stuff that we did while we were out there, I never thought I'd do anything meaningful with my life. So 6 years to the day after I walked out of jail, I had an interview at Vivent for my current position now. I've always wanted to help other women who have been through what I've been through, and to show people that you can change and that these are services that are needed. So getting into harm reduction, you meet people where they're at. This is not something that we can stop on our own, but being able to meet people where they're at and give them the tools and the resources that they need to get where I have gotten. We won't recover if we aren't given a chance. So giving a voice to those who are in the same situation that I have been through is why I keep doing what I'm doing. And everybody has their own opinion about harm reduction and the things that we do, but it's all about education. And until you or somebody in your family has gone through it, not that I would ever wish that upon anybody, it's a lot harder to understand. So education is key. And I'm so glad that we have other organizations to help us along the way.
Thank you so much for your courage, Amanda, and being able to share your story in front of everybody today. As we know, and why we're here is that it does take a community, and I am so thankful to have these community partners with us today. A reminder, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat now. We do have a question in the chat, and I'm going to leave this open to whoever wants to answer it. Does Narcan have the same life-saving reversal effects with heroin laced fentanyl as without heroin not laced with fentanyl? Who would like, Amanda?
I can jump. So, Narcan is, for opiate reversals. However, fentanyl is a synthetic opiate. So using Narcan, when there is a fentanyl overdose will have the reversal effect. When it comes to methamphetamine or anything else that's being laced with fentanyl, if they are out, if they have overdose due to the fentanyl part of it, then yes, it will have that effect. We have noticed that it is taking a little bit more Narcan to bring somebody back from a fentanyl overdose. But yes, to answer your question, if it is not heroin, but it still has fentanyl, yes, it will bring them back.
Thank you. Moving on to some more questions. What is your response to those who may consider your work as enabling drug use in our community?
I can take that one, Hannah. You know, when we hung these boxes in our residence halls and in our public buildings, it didn't come without criticism. We were actually accused of enabling or encouraging drug use of our students. And I tell people those are stigmas we have to get past as a society, because that's simply not the case, particularly now with fentanyl and people not even knowing what they may be ingesting. So the stigmas around that is something we all have to work and get through to help and get through this thing together. So it's going to be a community effort to get this done. I'm just very grateful that our university leadership was progressive enough to think that this was a good idea and allowed us to do it. So we need more people thinking like that as well as we go forward. And also, if I could, from Amanda's story, I've been doing this a long time, policing for 33 years, and I got to police through the crack epidemic of the late 80s and early 90s, and I saw the mistakes we made. And I think that's one of my jobs is as a senior leader of policing, is to pass on the strategies that worked and didn't work. And back during the crack times, we put a lot of users in jail and prison, and actually the sentences were quite heavy at that time. And it didn't really solve any problems other than to break up families and cause more pain to people that were suffering. Those are things we have to consider in law enforcement. And I know law enforcement's always looking for alternatives. And that's something that Breakwater and organizations like that have to help fill those gaps, and OFR. So we just don't have two ways to handle these problems. There's many ways to handle these problems.
Thank you, Kurt. There's been some concern in the community regarding the current state of the Good Samaritan laws. Amanda, can you please speak on those terms?
So as in like what it's at now, or?
Yeah, or just be able to explain to the community a little bit about even what is the Good Samaritan Law.
So the Good Samaritan Law is a bill that is put into place that will protect people who are in the situation of an overdose. It will protect them from being charged with drug paraphernalia and or charges of a controlled substance. So people were afraid to call 911 or bring somebody to the emergency room. They were leaving them at houses. They were dropping them outside of emergency rooms. They were throwing them out of vehicles into ditches to leave them to die because in fear that they were going to be charged for that person's death. So the Good Samaritan Law was put into place, and it does protect that person that is making that call to 911 and providing medical services until EMTs get there. It does not, probation or parole does not have an effect on it. And so it's a really important bill to have because it does help, it helps save lives.
Thank you. This is a question for all of you. What do you feel is the most important piece to keep your work moving forward? And I am going to direct the first answer from Danielle.
From the health department's perspective, stigma is the biggest one. If we could eliminate that. The other one is partnerships. None of this work happens in silos. All of this is really important to be able to work together. Because if we all work together, we can actually solve a problem versus all of us working in silos. You're creating gaps if you do it that way. By spreading out, you're filling in some of those gaps and help meeting people where they are, and not saying, well, we don't help that and push over there. You're able to just take everyone in and say, how can we help you? Because we have these partnerships and we can have those warm handoffs and create that safe space for people.
Thank you. Kurt?
Yeah, Danielle stole my answer. No, I would say that, you know, this is an urgent issue. And I don't think people understand that how urgent this is. There's people dying in our community, and things need to be done. And this has to be a community response. I appreciate that in the UW system now, that they have an open enough mind that they listen to what we're doing here. And now you're starting to see movement along the other UWs trying to do the same thing. So really, that's what we need. That's what I'd like to see going forward, is that the community has an open mind about this and doesn't cross their arms and think that's not my problem, because it really is. It's everybody's problem. And sooner or later, it's going to affect us one way or another down the road.
Amanda, do you have anything to add?
So they both stole my answer. So. But yeah, I agree with Danielle and Kurt. Stigma is a huge issue, and we need to remain open-minded. This isn't something that we want for ourselves or anybody that is involved. So meeting people where they're at and understanding that some days are going to be good and some days are not going to be good. But having those resources available and allowing people to feel comfortable and safe, to be open and honest about what they're going through, and what they feel that they might need for help.
Thank you. Last question, unless the audience has other questions, we have one more question for our panel. If you had a magic wand to improve harm reduction work in either our area of Winnebago County or across the state, what would you change and what would that landscape look like? Go ahead, Amanda, you can start.
Education. So again, it stems from education. People close a blind eye to it, and like Kurt said, it's not their problem, since they're not going through it. Funding, you know, having funding available for people wanting to get into treatment, and wanting to get help. People think it's very easily accessible. It's not, and there's not a whole lot of resources. You know, treatment facilities have long waiting lists, or, you know, issues within insurance and stuff like that. But having the funding and finances to be able to get people where they need.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kurt.
You know, we're very fortunate here in the Valley to have Narcan. Actually, it's plentiful. And just programs like what we did here at UWO, being able to give it out at no cost. It's not like that all over the state. I talked to my colleagues that are chiefs of police in other universities in that part of the state, and they are struggling to be able to get their hands on it. So harm reduction we need to help people make it through to the next day so we can get them help and get them into recovery. So that's what I would like to see going forward is we need a more consistent approach across the state so we can help our people in our region anyway.
Thank you. Danielle.
I guess I would have two things. The first I would have is that stigma piece. If we could get rid of that, that would be great. You think about the statistics that both Hannah and I shared. You know, in our county locally in 2021, we have 40 suspected overdoses. That's not a number. That's people. Those are people that we have lost in our community. And those people leave a hole in their personal lives and in our community. We need to see everyone as people, that they are still just as vibrant as the rest. And we need to keep them in our communities. We need them here. And the other thing is the health department. If I could have everyone in our community recognize Narcan, know how to use Narcan, that would change a lot of things.
Thank you to all three of you for coming together to really inform the community of our harm reduction efforts. On the screen is contact information. A couple of reminders before we leave today is that we will not have a lunch and learn next week, but please join us on March 29th at 12 p.m. Using the same link you joined this one. March 30th is the We Heart You Recovery in Our Community event. The link is in the chat. Please feel free to join. It's free. Learn more about recovery and be able to educate yourself, your friends and family. And finally, if you have missed any of the previous recordings, you can go to Breakwater's YouTube channel, just Breakwater on YouTube, and the recordings are up. Thank you all again for joining us, and thank you again for our great panel. Have a great rest of your week.